Okay, you were live.
Beautiful. Got it. Welcome, everybody, to the 9th of December, 2021, the last supply chain special interest group general meeting of 2021. Thanks for joining today, whether live or whether the recording on our wiki and possibly YouTube here. Going through the agenda, just to kind of kick us off, all are welcome as always, both in terms of input today as well as going forward. In addition, Hyperledger, Linux Foundation, antitrust policy, everything that you say here is in a public forum and can be shared. So please keep that in mind as you're going through. Also, that we're not in any sort of collusion type of practice here from the antitrust policy. Let's see here. If you're new, I'll take a beat here and see if anybody wants to introduce themselves here. I see a few names out here, familiar faces, so that's good. Okay, so announcements. First off, so there's been some discussion between Eric Velquet, my co-chair, or our co-chair here in supply chain, as well as Andrea Frossanini, who is the chair for the trade finance SIG, about joining forces in 2022. And so yesterday I put something out onto the mailing list and a little bit of background on it and asking for feedback, input, thoughts, either yes or no on that potential merger. So there's already been a couple of people have come back and said, yep, makes sense. Would like to see that. And so we're looking for a little bit more input. So please share your thoughts there. Eric, you want to share a little bit on how the use case surveys are going?
Hey, Tom, long time no see. How are you?
I'm doing fine here.
Use cases. We have been combing through the information and have yet to finish combing through the information on the use cases, a small project. So what we're going to do is extract some of the past presentations that we've had from our guests and merge that with the information that we have received. And hopefully very soon, if not very early next year, we'll be able to pull out some kind of statistics or graphics for you to give you an overview of the information that we've collected. From a RFQ questions perspective, I think that's
that, Eric, if you'd like.
Say that again.
You want me to talk the RFI questions?
Go for it.
Okay, cool. So Yari and Nicolo, I mentioned them previously. They're over at LIUC University over by Milan. They've been spearheading the project there. I just got this morning a new template or an updated template from Nicolo. Have not had a chance to look at it, and he's looking to put something out here. It'll be on the mailing list sometime before Christmas. He's broken it out into two sections. One kind of, well, actually three sections. One, all the general RFI questions about who you are, company, all that kind of stuff. Two, blockchain specific questions, such as public or private, or what would be what's your specific knowledge. And then three, he has a section in there about supply chain questions and what type of, where specifically, for instance, a solution actually provides value within the supply chain context. So look for that shortly here, coming from a Nicolo on the mailing list. So with that, let's flip over here to today's session. Today we have Andrei Semenov speaking, sharing with us a little bit about the work that they've done with inventory management at Coca-Cola North America, specifically with Hyperledger, as well as maybe a little bit of where they're thinking in the future. Andrei is the Director of Supply Chain Innovation at Kona. You can see it in the background there. He's got a beautiful background. Andrei and I actually met last year at the Global Forum at the, whatever it was, the evening event with the balloons and at the branch. Was it Corona Ranch? Was it, Andrei, I believe?
Ironically, yes.
And, you know, Daniela, I don't think anyone could have planned that even any better. there.
Yeah, or any worse maybe, but yes. I can't wait till we all get together again. We'll have to find a more creative place to go to.
There you go. We'll see how good you are at predictions with the naming of the next place we go to. So anyway, so we had a great conversation about family and blockchain and all sorts of good things. So it's great to have him today here, sharing a little bit of thoughts. With that, Andre, well, I'll stop sharing and allow you to start sharing here.
Very good. So let me go ahead and share my screen.
I'll tell you when we have it.
Yeah, and yeah, Tom, thanks for inviting me and Eric as well to this forum. It's my first time here at the SIG. I was aware of the group, just you know, somehow was just making my my way here today. But happy to stay connected here with the group and sharing the story, but also hearing other stories. So our story I'm going to share is a pretty old news already. Our network is live for over 2 years on Hyperledger. I'm going to talk about what the use case is about, but a little bit about me. I'm a director of innovation for supply chain and operations in Kona, Coke One, North America. We work with 12 largest bottlers in North America. That about 95% of overall Coca-Cola distribution volume in North America, right? So these are the largest bottlers, and we as a Kona deliver our standard product to them and services, and we run their end-to-end business, starting with the manufacturing processes, procurement, then put away in the warehouse, taking orders from customers like retailers, restaurants, and others. And we do the last mile delivery through our solution of a Coca-Cola products. And each bottler is an independent company in the Coca-Cola franchise network. Not sure if the people who are watching realize it's a franchise system. Every bottler is an individual company, individual legal entity. And Kona works with 12 largest. We're bringing them on the same common platform as far as their core ERP goes. Now, the innovation group is looking after any potential gaps in our standard solution or process gaps, technology gaps, where we can add more value and drive revenue growth or cost optimization in the bottler's processes. And the bottling business is a very high OpEx business. A lot of processes involved, high cost assets. A lot of employees are engaged. So every time we can optimize, we can automate some process, we can make it more efficient, definitely goes back to the bottlers. So in the innovation, we look into the technologies like blockchain, machine learning, AI, RPA. How can we take our data that we have in our ERP systems, how we can make it work and bring value to the bottlers? But also what other people might not realize is that in North America, there are more than 12 bottlers. There are about 65, 67 bottlers who own the franchise system, a franchise, and then they work within their territory, whether it's been multiple states or just one county, depends on the agreement that they bought maybe 100 years ago. They operate in that area, and the smaller bottlers, they own their own IT systems, and they not necessarily produce the product themselves. So they have to go into the network, put the order, source the products from other bottlers. And this is where we saw an opportunity to introduce distributed ledger technology to make the network that they have established for hundreds of years, or maybe decades, and kind of replicate this on the technology platform to make it more transparent and make the supply chain transactions run frictionless there. Because we saw a lot of friction between the bottlers placing the orders, validating, making sure that they can order the right things and the right quantities, and there could be opportunities to a lot of gaps in how the order is placed, validated, and then tracked throughout the fulfillment process. So if you look into this map, this is the North America map from the Kona perspective. This is how Kona bottlers are servicing other bottlers from the ordering perspective. Our bottlers, most of them are producing bottlers, so we will sell product to others. But at the same time, we'll sell product between each other. We would buy product from the network. So if you think about this is the North American network of the Coca-Cola bottling companies. And our target here is basically to apply the distributed ledger technology, use our smart contracts to drive the process efficiencies and process transparency in supply chain. And I'm going to cover a little bit about the process on the next slides.
Andre, can I ask you a quick question there?
Absolutely.
To confirm what I thought I heard is that it's a tiered network and it's also a peer-to-peer network already, is kind of what I'm getting.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, good, thank you.
And what we don't show on this network, because it's currently not in scope, or was not in scope of our use case before. If you think about any suppliers or customers who are transacting with the Coca-Cola bottlers, they're kind of outside of this network, but this is where the opportunity is. Once we deploy and scale our network, then we can start working, or we're already working on the use cases to bring in a supplier that is now trying to work individually with each bottler, maybe build some integration, some process efficiencies, do some EDI transactions for invoicing, ordering, etc., and leverage the network effect to include the supplier into the network, and then everybody can leverage the integration through DLT. So if I go to the next slide and kind of talk a little bit about the traditional way or the way without blockchain in our environment and with blockchain. On the left-hand side, you see a picture where you have multiple bottlers who are producing bottlers. They're producing the product. However, they're not producing the product how they would want to produce, right? What the mix of the product is actually derived or driven by the organization that is strategically planning this throughout the network. So bottlers are individual companies, and there's another company on the corporate level who are making the strategic decisions, who can produce what, who can sell what to which bottler in which territories. So there are very strict business rules for that. Again, if you're placing an order, you need to either know these rules, you need to drive some automation to prevent errors from happening, or use smart contracts to drive that and automate. So our goal was to take the picture on the left and make the picture on the right where every bottler would become a participant of the network, and each of them would have a node or a ledger that would communicate through the channel to the network and other bottlers in a very systematic and in a very standardized way. And if I talk about the business challenges, I'll probably mention them, but we have the original producing bottlers. They buy and sell finished goods based on the terms defined on the original agreements. There are differences in between which products, which quantities can be ordered, delivered to other participants of the network, and the volumes are big. And even though you can probably manage this at a small scale, at a larger scale, you have to keep up with the versioning of what can be ordered from which location, and if you're not ordering the right thing, this can be resulted in the short shipments where the shipments will not be fulfilled in full, or substitutions, and at the end the customers will not get the product they need. That will impact their sales on the other side. They will be out of stock for the product, so they have to source it from some other locations. And then the reconciliation process on itself, it's very labor intensive. They need to go and look where the mistake substitution happened, or is it a true out of stock, or the item was not ordered correctly. And if you try to do it a few days after that you received it, you're already losing the time and spending a lot of effort on reconciling that. So the objective was for us to create the system that will validate the orders and sign the order before it even reaches the supplier. So for that, we're using smart contract and we're signing the orders. We're creating a hash of the order on the blockchain, and then the supplier node signs it before it even goes into the ERP system for ordering. And then the customer side, they wanted to track more precisely the status of the order fulfillment. They want to know when any changes are made to the order, when it goes to fulfillment, what is the latest date they can make changes to the order, when the order leaves the facility, how long will it take to get to their place, et cetera, et cetera. But also, what we're able to introduce is the ability to post a proof of shipment, which is your typical ASN through EDI, but also a proof of receipt that flushed out a lot of warehouse picking accuracy issues, for example, loaded something into the wrong truck or damage, etc. So anything that would result later on in the reconciliation process is called out on a blockchain in real time as the event happens, and the proof of this event goes onto the blockchain. And if I just go quickly here, this is our process without blockchain, and currently some of the bottlers still operate on that. As we're going out and deploying the solution, you would have two different ERPs, two different system of records. The order forms are shared by the supplier to the customers on a regular basis. And if you're a customer, you might be receiving the orders or the product from multiple suppliers. So you would have different versions of different kind of forms, some of it in Excel, some of it just in email or PDF. So there's no consistency on that. So you have to spend time and make sure that you order the right product from the right supplier. And as you submit the order, you don't have any visibility on the further fulfillment. And then you only see the product that is coming back to you when you open up the truck and you start unloading it, and you realize that there were some errors in order fulfillment, and then you go into the reconciliation mode. But at the same time, you're already out of stock on some of the important products, and you trying to scratch the surface and get this product shipped as soon as possible. That results into additional transportation costs and maybe some of the lost sales as well, because you can't ship your orders as you planned. And this is all due to lack of transparency and visibility in supply chain. So what are the options there?
Andre, can I ask you a quick question?
Absolutely, yeah.
So if I'm a retailer, I'm a national retailer, I'm going to be buying from multiple bottlers throughout the country, for instance, right? And if my local bottler can't supply it, normally would they go to a different bottler, or that one bottler who's in my territory where I think I need something, they have to figure out all the stuff behind the scenes?
Yeah, the franchise is by territory. There are some agreements on the cross-territory sales that I don't really know a lot of information. There could be an opportunity if it's a customer on the border of two territories. There probably is going to be an agreement where the other bottler could deliver, but in general, it's a territory agreement where one bottler only services the customers.
Okay, so from a retailer perspective, you're thinking of Coke as one entity, but they're all independent entities, and hence the idea here, the reconciliation doesn't. You see the brunt end of the lack of reconciliation. That's as right. A retailer. Okay, yeah. Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, we're not going to go into details on type of retailer. Definitely, there's national retailers and national groups working, but on the execution side, it will still go from the local warehouse.
Okay, thank you.
And what are the options that you can solve the problem? Definitely, bottlers that started tackling the first one, right? They relied on kind of semi-automated process. Maybe they started sharing some of the documents or Excel spreadsheets, some of the forms, business-driven forms through SharePoint, storage accounts, etc. But the different version of it, you can be different types of these forms from different suppliers. And then as you order, you don't have a visibility, what's changed, am I ordering still the right one? Is the form updated, etc., etc. Is my procurement department using the latest form? So there's high probability of error, and there's no validation what the order will look like. Then the next stage where some of the larger bottlers started moving towards is building the EDI between the participants. So it would be strictly peer-to-peer EDI projects that would last a very long time. And every time they do EDI implementation, since they work with different entities, everybody have their own opinions on what they should be exchanging between the systems. Each EDI project now becomes the implementation, and then at the end, if you think about just the number of peers that needs to be connected using EDI, I just put some numbers here. Even if you need to connect, 10 participants on the network, you're talking about 45 connections between them, and then there's no standard way for doing that. So the support process could be pretty bad and cost inefficient. And then the third option that we came forward with is wanted to build a single shared network with common interfaces. And the first thought was, you can use just a centralized database using that. And I think this was tried before, but the problem is that the individual participants might not necessarily like to join or start sharing the data to a particular vendor who would have this centralized database. So we looked into the opportunity to introduce blockchain technology, where each of the participants of the network would own their own node, and we would have a smart contract that will drive the security and privacy, as well as all the business rules that will be agreed upon by the whole network. We saw this as an innovation project, potentially higher adoption cost, maybe slower pace, but really high efficient, very automated process, and API-driven technology. So we have a standard of the data and the structure of the data for each domain, how we exchange it between the network participants. And I think this helped us to start doing the rollouts or deployments of the solution to new participants much quicker. And so at the end, the architecture high level looked somewhat like here presented on the picture, where you have a system of record. They're really doing their own thing. We don't need to be on the same platform. Their own finance, their own HR systems, their own warehouse systems, where we're connecting some of the capabilities of that inventory management systems or ordering systems to the Hyperledger nodes, and the nodes are connected into the network where we are sending the proofs of the documents, and we're connecting them and running some of the chain code logic to reconcile the documents, call out any discrepancies, any business logic deviations that bottlers seem to want to have that real-time effect, like the difference between what was ordered, what was shipped, any load modifications, anything that was shipped versus received, the timestamp when it went to the warehouse for fulfillment, meaning that I cannot make any changes after that. The shipment, the timestamp of a shipment, truck, trailer number, who is carrying it to me. We're using the third-party carriers to do that. So all the information about the transportation goes there as well and shared via the blockchain. And then on the receiving side, what we're seeing, there was a lot of opportunity to minimize number of claims going from customers to supply and bottlers because of the either shipping errors or receiving errors. They're being reconciled immediately, and then they use these documents and these triggers that go from the blockchain to the bottlers as their proofs of the reconciliation issues. And then they can tackle it right away. They can look into the floor and say, we forgot to load these 2 pallets, or we received incorrectly. And this is where they're seeing a lot of value in time saving, is that their operations can go and reconcile the order immediately and make the corrective actions, whether it's being reducing the invoice before I send it, or correcting my transaction if I did it incorrectly. Okay. Moving on to the next slide. This is just an example or a snapshot of a UI that.
Andre?
Yeah. Yes, Tom.
Sorry, I was on mute and I didn't move fast enough. Are you open to a question from Sherwood has raised his hand?
Yep.
You know what? Actually, I decided I'm going to wait till the end because it's tangential, so I don't want to take us off course. Thank you.
Fair enough, Sherwood. No worries.
And Tom, not to interrupt, but since we're talking about questions, just note that people can ask questions on the YouTube live stream, and actually I see there's one question there, so just be aware. There's a chat over there too.
Okay, is there a question that we should David, could you read it off maybe?
I'll copy it over, but note that I have a conflict, so I'm going to drop off. I'll copy this one over, but if you want to just keep an eye on
Okay.
further questions.
Yeah, and I think,
Okay.
Tom, yeah, I'll probably need another 5-7 minutes. I'll wrap up, and then we can deep dive into
Fair
it.
enough.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
So the way we built the application, we knew that the standalone implementation of Hyperledger will not really help or drive the adoption, and simply because we don't want anybody working in two different systems. You do something in your system of record, you go reflect in distributed ledger. So what we focused on first is building the integrations and plugins to our network. We work with our partners to build the plugin for other systems of records. Our system of record is SAP, forgot to mention. So we have tight integration there, but smaller bottlers not using SAP, using different systems. So we partnered to build a plugin so it can communicate seamlessly to the blockchain. And then we build some of the applications on top of the chain code to provide some reports, some microservices that could display this reconciled data on the network, and then kind of show the reconciliation status, so they can use this application dynamically to see what went wrong when they're doing a research in a particular order. And here what you see is different orders that kind of are put together in a one kind of order chain, right? So everything starts with a purchase order and kind of ends with the goods receipt on our side. And every step is tracked, and every change in every step is being communicated. And at the right time, the system would sync up and make sure that they have the latest information about the transaction. So if we look into which kind of business of concern, areas of concerns were addressed for business, definitely productivity, process inefficiencies in the manual order placing. So we kind of removed that part completely. Now everything is done within the system of record and being validated through blockchain. And if validation passes, as I mentioned before, the supplier node would sign the purchase order content. So the items and the quantities and the dates will be signed and stored as a signed certificate on the Hyperledger fabric. And if anything changes on the customer side, they decided to bump up the order quantities, they decided to swap something, they need to recertify it again before they can even place or put the order into the supplier system. Now, when the order is in the supplier system, we provide visibility to the customer, different stages of the order, any changes that are done to it. We're notifying them either via the app, via the emails, different triggers, different methods of notification, but now they're up to date what's going on with their order. And then, before it was a very slow dispute resolution process where I might submit my claim a few days after I received, and then someone will do a research and asking, are you sure that you received less, not what I shipped, because we shipped everything. So there would be no kind of visibility to what's happening, and hence maybe losing some of the trust between, right? Because I know that I shipped everything and I know that I received what you shipped, but still I'm missing some. Blockchain is making it transparent. If you receive more or less, it will be shown here, right? And the supplier can do adjustment to the invoices based on this information immediately. And then from the scaling perspective or deployment, we built the APIs, we built plugins that help other system of records to plug in into the network, configure the data, do the minimum configuration of what they need to do on their system of records. And then the most part is spent is aligning on the data using the standards, like what are we exchanging, what product information we're exchanging between the system, what information about the other transaction we're exchanging, and aligning on that, making sure that the system of records are talking the same language. And then from there, it's pretty much done, right? And we can turn on a new participant relatively quickly and add it to the network. Yeah, so again, kind of similar points there, but what I I'm not going to go into the details of the numbers, right? They might not be relevant to the group here, but what we did from the very beginning, we invited the business to participate in the project. It was an innovation-driven project, but day one, we had the business representation in the room who helped us design process, identify the issues that they were having, and tackle the high value, high ROI points with our implementation. So was maybe a little bit slow in the very beginning as we're getting up to speed with just the concepts of the blockchain and aligning on the requirements. But on the tail end, has really helped us with the deployment and making sure that we can go all the way from the ideation, design thinking, to build the iterations, and all the way to production in less than a year. All right, so this is my last slide, kind of summarizing everything that I already talked about, but I think it's going to be a good time to maybe open up for Q&A.
Beautiful. Thanks, Andre, for sharing these thoughts here. Sherwood, you're ready to go. So let's turn it over to you, and then we'll go to the question from the live stream, and then we'll go to whatever other questions come in here. So Sherwood, you're on.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks, Andre. This is a really great presentation. It's really cool to see kind of some of this technology and kind of your experience and kind of the tactical approaches that you've done. I was curious with regards to the development of the standards. How did you go about developing those standards, and was there is there any kind of governance of the different stakeholders in the development of standards, and just kind of some of the general just governance of the system?
Yeah, very good questions. So first, I'll answer about the standards. We went after the standards, the industry standards, right? We didn't try to develop them ourselves, but we leveraged GS1 standards, and we said that if we're exchanging information about a product or an article, right, we're going to use these attributes of that, and G10 and UPC is what we use. We don't want to do any conversions or know which numbers use in your system. So we went after GS1 and also aligned with some of the specifics in the Coke system, which standards we use. So we kind of aligned, and I would say we use the standards. What the alignment was on is really on which attributes one parties want to see and other parties want to share, right? So I think the consensus was very hard to make on that, because some of the parties want to see more. They say, hey, when I order, can I also see your inventory levels? And the other party might not want to share that. So, and the pricing as well. So there were a lot of discussions like that where they argued between this is what we'd like to see, this is what the value we're going to get, and then the other party would not agree on that. Why? And can explain why they would not want to keep it private. So I would say standards taken from GS1, and then the initial group developing this kind of decided or agreed upon what we're going to use, and then kind of pivot into your second question about the governance. Any active participant of the network is a part of our governance meeting. So we review standards, review the backlog, vote, prioritize the backlog and the features that will be delivered. And then the potential network participants, they're also invited to these governance calls. They just don't have a vote on making the decisions.
They do not have a vote. Did you say that they do not? They're invited to attend the calls, but they do not have a vote on what?
So the active participants, they're actively voting and prioritizing, and then the potential or the prospects, they're invited, and then they provide their inputs. But really, we want them to become active and become active participant of the governance as well.
That's a really cool little incentive for them to get active. That's great.
Yeah.
Good. Anything else, Sherwood? Right now?
No, thank you.
Okay, great. So Andre, a question from YouTube. How many orgs, channels, and MSPs are set up?
Yeah, so at this point in time, we have 12 MSP orgs on the network, in the production network. The way we designed it, we're leveraging a lot of the PDCs, private data collections for sharing the data and sharing some of the data on the order. And we just use a single channel for the use case. So we're thought about making multiple channels, but from the kind of maintenance perspective, would have been a nightmare looking to number of participants that we have. So at this point in time, one channel, and maybe up to 5 smart contracts doing different things on the logic side for this particular use case, and then 12 MSPs.
Good. Okay, I am not on the YouTube channel, so if somebody else is on there and sees any other questions, if they could bring it up, I'd appreciate it here. I guess I need multiple monitors now. Here
Hey,
on my...
Tom, we have Eli asking or raising his hand, and Sherwood's also raising
Thank
his
you.
hand.
Thank you, Eric.
Hey.
So Eli, go for it.
Hey, yeah, this is Eli here, and I've actually seen this presentation maybe a month or two back at University of Arkansas board meeting, and I think the second time's even more impressive or watching it the second time, I'm even more impressed. It's just such a great use case for settling disputes between parties with a relationship. So I applaud you. You mentioned that each partner is actively hosting a node. Is that correct?
So as far as the architecture goes, at this point in time, we're using SAP Cloud Platform. So the large participant would own a node, so they would have full ownership, and then they would, but we would leverage a single contract to purchase that. And actually, at this point in time, looking, in how to, we've done a few POCs on the cross-cloud connection of Hyperledger nodes.
Mm-hmm.
We're not done with yet in production, but definitely possible if we want to connect an on-prem node or a node from another cloud provider.
Excellent. Thanks for the clarification there. And again, I just love this project. I think it's just such a perfect use case. And I think the scale of it also makes it really well where, it's not thousands of different entities. So it's really doable. And I look forward to seeing what comes out of it next. So thanks for presenting.
Thanks, Eli.
Good. Sherwood, did you have another question, or is just that from previously?
No, I did. Thank you. Andre, I was curious if you could share a little bit about your experience kind of selling this idea, getting those first early adopters on board, and kind of what worked and what didn't work for kind of kicking this off and getting those first early adopters involved.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think it was a hard task to sell it on the business side. That's why we introduced them to the concept early enough. And I would say the most skeptical people in the room from the business side now are pioneers and actually helping sell it to the other business units and other partners. So they became kind of the backer of our use case and the technology we use, and kind of helping us with adoption. I would say, we're very pragmatic in which tasks we go after. I think I wouldn't say something didn't work, but once they understood the concept, what it's all about, and it's, everybody thought about blockchain being, this, something new and a mystery, and maybe it will just change the world, right? But nobody knew what exactly it was doing. So everybody started throwing ideas, and we can do this and that. But we had to be very pragmatic and say, what exactly we want to do there. We want to follow some checklist that will validate the use case if it's applicable for this or not. And I wouldn't say something didn't work, but we had a lot of use cases that we just said it would not make sense to use distributed way of storing data and reconciling data. I think that's kind of the way we're approached. But also, from the adoption perspective, we would, even though from the technology perspective, the adoption side of it is not a big deal, but from the change management perspective and just from the overall education and the buy-in is, we're still working on that, so we can go and present the value and the potential of what we can do once we start having the network effect. It was very hard to move the needle when you had 2 participants at first, but now as we're having more participants, and now these participants are generating more connections on the network between each other, I think this becomes an easier sell. But now, as we have the network for a particular use case, I think we're kind of pivoting towards adding more functionality, so we can now use the network effect and start tackling the use cases that would have been impossible if we were just starting from scratch, but are very attractive if you have a network of participants already using the network.
Thank you for that. And just a quick follow-up question. When you were kind of introducing these use cases, did you lead off with the business case where you were kind of talking about, trying to estimate the costs and the efficiencies that they could provide and the actual monetary value that something like this could offer them in kind of the near term and long term? And then if you did, what did you focus on and how did you calculate it?
Yeah, so if there was a slide at the end of the presentation kind of tackling this, and what we looked into is for this particular use case, we kind of compared the effort or what they were doing before and after. So this was a study after 6 months of running pilot. Definitely not before. We had assumptions before, but we couldn't quantify that. But as we moved forward, there was improvements on the quality of data, improvements on the time spent on the reconciliation of orders, and kind of this is what we took as our case study and presented it to the new participants or potential prospects to sell it and invite others to participate in the network.
And so yeah, that makes sense. I mean, obviously you would be working off of estimates in the very beginning. How close were the estimates? This is my last question. How close were your estimates to the reality of what you discovered?
So these estimates that were shown, there's an actual study on the production running.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely, each participant would have their own structure, how they calculate this. We haven't done study for each implementation or each deployment, but definitely as we start working on additional use cases that will include additional functionality, we'll do ROI study or ROI plan for each of the use cases.
Thank you.
Good. Any other questions out there?
I think Eli has another question.
Oh, Eli, go for it.
No, I think my hand's still just raised. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Making muscles. I have a question, Andre. You just mentioned ROI. Did you have a sense of how long that return would take on this first use case?
So
when you
we
started the project?
Yeah. So as far as the the return, right? It just I think it's funny, you ask that. So you have different metrics and these ROI that kind of relate to your kind of performance increase, optimization in the process, and you're making less effort, spending less time on the reconciliation. But the ROI point that one of the bottlers made is the cost of just one trailer load of product that is done wrong covers the whole year of run cost for the solution, right? So, and then if you think it at scale, right, it's just, they do hundreds and thousand loads. It depends, what the network size becomes, right? So it just helps to keep it much cleaner and react to any error happening much faster. Definitely, blockchain doesn't solve this, the last mile or kind of first mile problem where if there was an error made during picking and it loaded there, right? We try to implement some other technologies that would catch that, sensors, computer vision, and others, or would actually count what's being physically loaded into the truck, and then send an alert if it's not matching with what the order should be. But at least we're, as we catch them on the receiving side, we can improve the processes and make them better for future, right away, because we're bringing the visibility to the errors happening in the supply chain process.
Good. Thanks, Andre. Can I ask a question based on that? Did anybody need to implement any new technology, any of the bottlers other than the blockchain network? And I think you mentioned APIs and plugins probably to their existing browsers and their existing systems of record. Is that pretty much what they needed to buy into?
Yeah, so from the technical implementation perspective, it would be just a plugin that comes with the system upgrade. So by default, they would have it. Well, everybody has it now. Now it's just a matter of activation, and then the web application, they don't really need anything, right? They just need, to start using it.
Yeah. Okay. And they didn't have to buy any new sensors or anything. They just whatever they had
Right.
is what they used. Okay. Good.
Right. Yeah, I would say most of the effort is spent on data cleansing and aligning of data. That if you bring the new system of record that it, for some reason became off sync with your kind of the master book of your product information or other, it takes longer for us to align on that, make sure that we keep everything clean there. But after that is done, after data is cleansed, then everything is working pretty well.
Good. Thank you. Okay. Going once, going twice. Any last questions here for Andre before we wrap up? Okay. Or somebody's got to have a faster finger there. Okay. Thank you, Andre, very much for sharing here in December what you guys did with this project here around managing inventory and helping all those bottlers there. So there sounds like they're pretty happy with you, and it sounds like you have some tailwind there based on the success of this project. So we appreciate you sharing this with us here, and look forward to hearing lots more good stuff coming out of Kona here. So with that, folks, this is our last session of the year. We will be back on the 6th of January, where we're planning on having Eric's going to lead the discussion on 2022 and what are some of the thoughts, what should we be doing, what can we do to bring value out there in the marketplace very tangibly. So look forward to that. And in the meantime, please share your thoughts on the possible merger of supply chain and trade finance SIG on the mailing list, and enjoy your last 3 weeks of the year here and your new year with that. So with that, bye everybody. And again, thank you, Andre.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, folks.
Thank you.